Senator Elizabeth Warren recently introduced a bill that targets the high prices of prescription drugs in America. And looking over it, this is legislation that's absolutely fantastic, and I just don't think that it's getting the attention it deserves, because in the event this were ever to be codified into law, it would really be beneficial to the American people, and I think something like this is long overdue. So for more details about this, we go to David Dayen of The Intercept, who reports Warren introduced legislation on Tuesday with Representative Jan Schakowsky that would create an Office of Drug Manufacturing within the Department of Health and Human Services. That office would have the authority to manufacture generic versions of any drug for which the U.S. government has licensed a patent whenever there is little or no competition, critical shortages, or exorbitant prices that restrict patient access. About 90% of all prescription drugs filled are for generic medications, but recent events have revealed that the generic market is also broken. A 2017 National Bureau of Economics Research paper found that generic competition has weakened over time as fewer firms compete to make alternatives. By 2016, 40% of all generics were made by a single manufacturer. Warren's bill, the Affordable Drug Manufacturing Act, attempts to address that market failure by having the government pick up the slack. The Office of Drug Manufacturing would acquire rights to manufacture generic drugs or contract them to be manufactured by an outside entity. The legislation explicitly states that those generic drugs must be offered at a fair price that covers manufacturing and administrative costs while ensuring patient access. The office could strip a contractor of its ability to make and sell the drug if the price point is too high. Proceeds for these sales would go back to covering agency costs, making it a self-sustaining entity. The government would also be authorized to manufacture active ingredients for medications. This has become a problem as major drug companies routinely deny rivals samples of their products, which are used in testing to determine whether the generic is an equivalent treatment. One drug is listed specifically. Generic insulin treatments would have to be produced within the first year of the legislation's passage. Prices for insulin have skyrocketed in recent years, and shortages are common. In market after market, competition is dying as a handful of giant companies spend millions to rig the rules, Warren said in a statement. The solution here is not to replace markets, but to fix them. Now, I wouldn't necessarily argue that markets are the solution here, but nonetheless, what she's doing is really important because this would help seniors in America, individuals who struggle to afford the cost of their prescription drugs. Now, if you'll recall, not too long ago, Bernie Sanders and Ro Khanna teamed up again to introduce legislation that also attacks this very issue. It attacks the prices of prescription drugs. Now, what their bill does is allows the government to grant licenses to companies to produce alternatives to drugs that they deem excessively priced. Now, even though Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren may soon be rivals in the upcoming Democratic Party presidential primary, the bills here that they're both introducing are actually complementary. They wouldn't conflict with each other. They're both complementary, and together they would ultimately produce more options than just passing them separately. So it's a great way to take on Big Pharma, albeit in two different ways. So they're kind of tackling this from two different angles, which is really great. And in a roundabout way, when I read this, it sounds like Elizabeth Warren is kind of introducing a public option version of, prescription drugs that allows us to tackle it in this way. So this is something that is long overdue, and I'm actually surprised that it hasn't been introduced previously. Now, I shouldn't say I'm surprised because we all know that Big Pharma has a stronghold on our government. They lobby, they submit campaign contributions to politicians, so that's why this issue hasn't been addressed. But nonetheless, this as a solution is just good public policy. So I'm surprised nobody thought about this sooner. I'm surprised that this hasn't come to my attention. So credit where it's due. Elizabeth Warren is doing something here that would actually save lives. And that's why it's really important. And I like that she set up her bill so that way it wouldn't conflict with Sanders. So it's not this either or. These are both two bills that are absolutely fantastic. The Bernie and Khanna bill and the Elizabeth Warren bill. So by pushing for this, it shows that Elizabeth Warren really is one of the best senators in America. Because think about this, it's not that often that anyone in Congress does anything that benefits average Americans, but Elizabeth Warren, regardless of how bold her policies may be, they're at least always looking out for the American people, and this is one of those instances where she's showing that she is a fighter. So credit where it's due. Elizabeth Warren, she's disappointed me in the past, so we don't have to rehash all of that, but this right here is absolutely phenomenal, and I think I'd go as far as to say that this is a heroic move by her, because this is what would save lives. So the Bernie bill, the Elizabeth Warren bill, along with Medicare for All, would once and for all solve this healthcare crisis in America, and I'm glad that we're finally starting to elevate these issues, elevate the issue specifically of the high cost of prescription drugs in America, because this is something that affects a lot of Americans. The fact that lawmakers haven't really been talking about it seriously until just a couple of years ago is baffling. And again, it's because they're corrupt, but nonetheless, it's something that has got to be addressed. So this is long overdue, and it's a phenomenal piece of legislation, and I really hope that it gains a little bit more attraction, because I'm disappointed that more people aren't talking about this. I'm disappointed that we didn't really hear a peep about this in the mainstream media, but this is great. This is legislation that actually would help Americans in a really substantial way, and I absolutely hope that it gets passed.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.